Wednesday, July 19th, 2023. That's only one. Are we going to have the attorney?
We are, Mr. Chairman. This is because it was a special meeting. She had a previously scheduled vacation.
Okay.
So, we put the way we ordered the meetings to volume. This last time is we put all the items that we were sure we needed to turn on.
Okay, great, no problem. So roll call.
Mark Hom,
Here.
Juan Con,
Here.
Ed LeBlanc,
Here.
Zaid Shamsi Basha,
Here.
Dan Waleski,
Here.
Evelyn Arcuyo, Alexander Cole. You have a quorum.
Okay. So, you stand up for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, do we have any additions, deletions, or reordering of the?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So should we approve the minutes from June 7th, 2023, as the board had a little time to go over those? Okay with those? Yeah. All in favor? Aye. So pass. Let's go here. All right, the cases, we'd like to swear in the staff and applicants. If you're going to speak today on behalf of a project, we'd like to swear you in at this point.
Please stand and raise your right hand if you plan to give testimony. Do you swear and affirm the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We've got several projects here, and I don't want to name all of them, but the ones that are listed in the agenda, do we have proof of publication? Okay, thank you very much. Any withdrawals or postponements, anything?
Nope.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have anything on consent?
No.
Thank you very much. All right, is there any board discussion at this point? Okay, there will be a disclosure from myself that my firm will be presenting a project that I will use myself on behalf of. So, thank you. Unfinished business.
One, you're gonna need to file paperwork with all of the departments already.
Yeah, there are. So the unfinished business. Any unfinished business that we have? No? All right, thank you. All right, so on to the new business, item A, PZB project number 23-0000009, request by Robert Cardano. Sorry about that. My Italian isn't so good. For the approval of the mural located on the south facade of 920 North Dixie Highway. The subject site is zone mixed use, Dixie Highway and UDH, and has a future land use designation of mixed use east. This is going on all over the city, and because we have that new future land use, like to open the staff.
Good evening, I'm Abraham Fogel, and I'll be presenting this item. So starting off with the location, this is an aerial view of the block. As you can see, the property is located mid-block between 9th Avenue North and 10th Avenue North on North Dixie Highway. The mural is proposed on the south facade of this property. The mural will show a beach scene, but unlike most painted murals in the city, this artwork will be installed using printable vinyl adhesive with UV protection. The product specifications were included in your board packet. The artist, James Zalusi, I hope I pronounced that correctly, created the mural. This slide shows other samples of his work, which also utilize that vinyl adhesive. As outlined in the staff report, it is staff's analysis that the mural complies with the comprehensive plan, strategic plan, community appearance criteria, and standards for murals as conditioned. Staff did include one condition. You can see to the left, there's a QR code. Our condition is to remove that to ensure there is no commercial messaging, and it's just simply artwork. So staff is recommending approval with that condition that I mentioned, and the other conditions are standard related to obtaining a building permit. If at any point the mural is deteriorated, it would be removed per the mural removal agreement. So that concludes my presentation, and the applicant is here with us tonight and can answer your questions.
Would the applicant like to come up and light us on these of the murals?
Lightning. Well, it's just, it represents a Polynesian theme. Oh, Robert Cartagini. So the mural just, I think, represents a beach scene. We have Polynesian themed products in our store, so that's hence why you see a volcano scene in it. And, you know, it's just, we felt like it would beautify the neighborhood, would, you know, make that parking lot a little less unappealing. And we like it. We thought it was good. Initially, we had like a tiki hut in there with the brand on it, not knowing you can't do that, so that was removed.
Okay. You realize there's no volcanoes.
Yes, I know that.
Okay, all right.
I have a question. I noticed just within the reading it, it said something about how the mural was going to wrap around the front of the edge with artwork.
Yeah, initially, and I do believe that was disallowed, so now we're just looking at the side of the building.
Okay, I noticed it in one of the letters.
Yeah, and what was gonna be on the front was kind of more of the bamboo effect, and then a sign was gonna be on it with our building, our brand, you know. On the front
So
side.
it's just on the south facing wall of it.
Yeah,
And I believe the applicant, he will just do a separate signage through permitting. We wanted to keep the commercial and the artwork separate.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Well, I have a question. Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the technology, the process? Is there a warranty on the mural?
Yes. So it's a product that's made by 3M. It's called the Envision Print Film. It has a 7-year, I'm trying to pull it up there. It has a 7-year lifespan. Hold on, is that it? Oh, that's not what I wanted. Yeah, so it has a 7-year lifespan. It is a non-PVC film, Green Guard Gold certified. It adds LEED 4 credits anywhere it's applied. It can be applied to our particular building that was inspected, and so the installation is good. And as I said, it has a 7-year service life. Okay.
What's the advantage to doing the vinyl as opposed to having it painted by somebody?
Vinyl lasts longer. The paint tends to fade. So the UV coating that's a part of this vinyl is a lot more durable.
Give a reflection?
No. It'll be flat just like that.
We probably put it, well, manufactured.
Yeah, they printed with a UV print.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right. Good. Any comments from the board?
Question, has this been used before? I'm interested in the technology to see if this, we're gonna see more of this. Is this the first time you've seen this and like what?
As far as I'm aware, they're almost always painted. We had one instance on a building abutting Dixie, but it was not this type of product. I think it was more paper based and it didn't hold up very well. The good thing is we do always require the mural removal agreement, so if any point we notice, it's not looking great, they're required to remove it or, repair it. In this case, they probably couldn't repair it, just remove it.
Sorry, we've been getting a lot of feedback. Just keep your mics off if you don't, if you're not speaking. I don't know what's happening.
Right, we're gonna make a motion.
I'll do it. I move to approve PZB project number 23-00000009 for mural installation. The structure located at 920 North Dixie Highway. The application meets the mural criteria based on the data and analysis in the staff report.
There's a second? I'll second. All in favor? Aye.
No.
Motion passes 4-1.
Okay. Next one. PZB project number 23, that's.
You gotta turn your mic back on.
10. A conditional use permit request for a plus or minus 3,400 square foot medical office, outpatient clinical medical office use located at 1622 North Federal Highway. Subject property zone mixed use, Federal Highway has a mixed use east and the future land designation, which I think should fall into. Do we have anything from staff?
We do. We have a presentation for the board. Good evening. For the record, Scott Rodriguez with Planning and Zoning. The item before you is Animal Therapy Center's request for consideration of conditional use permit for a 3,400 square foot medical office use located at 1622 North Federal Highway. The medical office will provide counseling sessions and group therapy. The existing conditions, here are the existing conditions. Subject site is located on the northeast, southeast corner of North Federal Highway and 17th Avenue North, and is within the mixed-use Federal Highway zoning district. The structure on the property is constructed in 1961, so the existing site conditions do not conform to the current LDRs. The property does include a parcel on the north side of 17th Avenue North that accommodates surplus parking. The site is generally good for this use with enough parking, and staff is proposing conditions to reduce the nonconformities through landscaping. The property survey did show both parcels, and the project is consistent with comprehensive plan, strategic plan, a city's LDRs as conditioned, and conditional use standards. Therefore, staff is recommending approval with conditions. And that concludes my presentation, and the owner applicant is here tonight to answer any questions.
Please state your name and your address.
Yes, my name is Fernando Capetillo.
Keep the mics.
Fernando Capetillo. And my address? 480 Hibiscus, West Palm Beach.
The relationship to the project. Are you the-
I am the CEO. I'm on therapy center. Yes.
Mr. Chair, the applicant has asked some questions about condition number 2. So he wanted to bring to the board's attention, specifically related to timing of the application process prior to business license issuance. So I don't know if you want to expand on what you're asking the board to consider.
Well, yeah, we would like to apply for the business license as soon as possible, so we know that we have to comply with those conditions, and we would like if you could give us like a 3-month period of time so we can comply with those.
The 3-month time frame would just be applicable to the application process for the building permit and the site plan. So this would allow them to move forward with the business license application. And it gives them some time to submit the application because the application and the landscape plan have to be approved by staff. So, doing it now and then doing the business license later, that's going to add additional time to this. So he's asking for the board to consider that time frame.
And where this came from is we were having conditions to be conducted in a year, or improvements for a site to be completed within a year. And we were finding a lot of applicants weren't doing that. And then they have to come back and become code cases for folks being in violation of their development order. So we had started asking for a building permit to be issued or a minor site plan to be issued before the business license is issued, and we give time. So basically, they're asking for the business license to be issued before the application and the issuance. The most we've done for flexibility typically is require the application for the building permit and the application for the site plan. That's typically as lenient because then we have those in process and we're already working with the applicant. We typically do not anymore recommend a condition of approval for them to just come in for a business license without having applied for at least the minor site plan. Just because there's a foot in the door and then we have a record of them moving forward. There's some news happening there, I think. So if you want to think about the timing of what would feel comfortable, I know for us, we would like to, if not, I understand the building permit may come after the minor site plan, but we'd like to at least see the minor site plan in for application.
I don't see why they put in the slide for the building permit there. Site plan application, but
Yeah, I mean, the minor site plan might take some like more specific drawings related to the actual dumpster enclosures, that may take a little bit of time, so that's why I was, if the most lenient you could be would be just to allow the minor. Then to allow the minor and the building to be, would be the next, well, you could not require anything, I would say, but if you want to require something, the most lenient would be to just require the minor site plan. Then the next step would be to require the application of the minor site plan and the building permit. Then the next step is, would be R1, which is to require the issuance of the building permit and the minor site plan before the business license. Like I said, we have supported previously in cases where folks wanted to open the application of both the building permit and the minor site plan.
And I think the easier path for this is if you do the building permit application. And it would be when the code goes for use and occupancy inspection, he's gonna have an open permit. So that'll hold it up. So the easiest way would be the minor site plan application.
There's also, is there a lot of work? It seems like you're not doing anything to the outside of the building, other than signage, painting, things like that, but is there a lot of work on the inside of the building, obviously?
No,
No?
we just paint it, basically.
Just painting?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's gonna be some AC work and a couple of minor things like that as well, but, okay. There's a lot of landscape as well, and we'll have to get a landscape architect, to get involved in that, and these things take time. And it has to go through, our landscape department is extremely thorough from my experience. So I think that's something you should probably really look into, because it's very specific what you have to do, and this is also gonna take time as well. The landscape plan is going to be something that'll look at all the other world, so.
We can condition the landscape to just be a landscape permit through the minor process. So if
Okay.
they wanted to come in with the site plan for the dumpster location, and to note that they would provide the landscaping, they could do a general address, just generally their scope that they intend to comply with the conditions of approval. We can give them a little more time, and we don't have to issue the minor site plan, but we want to get them in process.
That's fine.
Because what happens is then people forget, right?
Right.
And then a year's up and then nothing's happened. They haven't hired a contractor or a design professional. They haven't done anything. And then they're out a year and then they're in code compliance.
So the landscaping, I've just seen this go around and around and around, and especially with the plans, the specificity of the plans. So want to make sure we get that done as well. So that's fine.
Is this the branch office or is this gonna be your home base?
It's gonna be our base. And it's gonna serve the Spanish speaking community. It's gonna be all in Spanish. Imperative. So I think something good for the community.
Other comments from the board? Questions for the applicant? Okay, anybody like to make a motion? Sure.
I move to approve with conditions, the request for planning and zoning board project number 23-005-00010. Additional use permit for medical office space upon the competent and substantial evidence provided in the staff report and in the testimony at the public hearing, with the exception that under the condition that the applicant would have to apply for the minor site plan approval, and rather than as stated in the condition, it issue building permit and required by the site plan.
Second that.
All in favor?
Motion carried unanimously.
Okay, great. If that was.
Item C, which is PVD project 23-005-00006. A conditional use permit request for a plus minus 2,622 square foot minor vehicle service and repair use located at 326 South H Street. The subject property is zoned artisanal industrial and has an artisanal mixed use AMU future land use designation. This is interesting because I didn't know that this, will this be a variance? It would be included in the artisanal use.
Yes, it's allowed as a CUP, conditional use permit.
Commission from it, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so the staff. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. For the record, Scott Rodriguez with Planning and Zoning. The item before you is Molina Auto Service Corporation's request for consideration of a conditional use permit for 2,600 square foot minor vehicular service and repair use located at 326 South H Street. Services provided will include oil changes, tire rotation, diagnosing, and maintenance in all types of cars. All repairs will be performed inside the building. The hours of operation will be 8 AM to 6 PM. Here are the existing conditions. The subject site is located on the east side of South H Street between 3rd Avenue South and 4th Avenue South, and is within the artisanal industrial zoning district. The subject site is surrounded by adjacent parcels that also have compatible zoning district designations. I wanted to point out that if the board approves the request, staff is proposing a condition to improve the site related to parking and landscaping, and staff does believe that in order to make the site functional, these improvements should be completed prior to business license. The project is consistent with the comprehensive plan, strategic plan, city's LDRs as conditioned, and conditional use standards. As the proposed use is not an industrial related use to the arts, staff recommends that the planning and zoning board review the information to determine if the proposed conditional use permit meets the criteria of the comprehensive plan and LDRs. If the planning and zoning board approves the request, conditions of approval have been proposed. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, do we have anything from the applicant? The applicant here? You state your name and your address, please.
Hey, good evening. My name is Sergeant Molina. Address is 5078 Sunset Trail, Lake Forest, 33463.
So would you like to describe your project a little bit or let us know?
I currently have a shop at 427 South 8, which is down the road from the current address, this address. And I'm having a lot of issues with the parking because where I'm at now, I don't have any parking for my work. Fortunately, a lot of times cars get dropped off or they get towed in and I don't have to do it on the road. And, I've been in this building for about 2.5 years. And since I got it, it's been a struggle with parking, especially now that we don't have overnight parking. That's, even more of an issue. This will allow me to perform better in my business, obviously, and, I don't know, just, it won't affect, Cedar Roads or anything like that.
Staff?
I think we have public comment.
We do have a public comment on this.
Okay. Would,
So I've included it, you have it in front of you, but I can read it as well
okay,
if you please. It says, good evening, my name is Ebert Ramirez, and I'm the owner of the properties located at 307 South Dixie, where I've had my office for over 10 years. Additionally, I'm the owner of an adjacent vacant lot at 303 South Dixie and under contract for the vacant lot at 229 South Dixie. For reference, I've attached images of the properties as they will be affected. The proposed conditional use permit is approved. Mr. Rivera's justification statement read there is no residential properties within 25 feet. We share an alley and my property is zoned mixed use, which eventually we will be building commercial and residential units to improve Dixie Highway. I respectfully urge the council to carefully reconsider any changes to the current zoning regulations that deviate from the improvements that have been made throughout the city and potentially discourage individuals from living in the area. The decision to buy my properties was driven by the positive changes I've witnessed in the city made over the last few years. Approving the permit, the council would establish a precedent that could potentially impact mixed-use properties in the area, including mine. Adding more automotive shops increases the congestion issues along H Street from 6th Avenue to 1st Avenue. And the street parking is often accompanied by vehicles that are undergoing repairs and cars are left there for days, which leaves insufficient parking for employees and customers in the area. My vacant lot has also been used for storage by mechanics in the area without my consent. At times, blind spots are created by vehicles, which causes drivers to not see bicyclists or other vehicles. This is a major safety concern. This is not a minor vehicle service and repair shop. Mr. Rivera's state of parking can be overnight, and he will do maintenance on transmissions, which categorizes the shop as a major vehicle service and repair shop by the conditions listed by planning and zoning and landscaping. If you refer to the attached pictures from a Google review left by a customer, it's evident he's conducting operations outside of his current property at 427 South H. Neighboring establishments also regularly engage in repair work outside without facing consequences, and it is a problem that is ongoing. I urge the board to vote to disapprove the conditional use permit. This area of Lake Worth is already an overpopulated automotive industry causing issues to its fellow business neighbors. Thank you for the time. Ebert Anthony Ramirez.
I guess I do have one question. There seems to be a difference in opinion here with the removal of transmissions, rebuilding engines and all things of that sort, which categorizes a larger space for you to use, right? And I guess longer times and longer waits for cars to get done. Instead of a quicker repair service is what this woman, the person was advocating. Is it true within the recommendation, would it work for you for the recommendation with the conditions? It says that there wouldn't be only repair of engine blocks and transmissions.
They will not be at this location now, because I already have the other location at 427, which is, I have a major license for auto repair and auto body.
Right.
So the second building would just be for minor stuff, in and out every day.
So this would be for providing brake repairs, tire repair, installation, muffler replacements.
Correct, sir.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that
In
would
and
be
out,
more- in and out.
trying to expand, that's.
Right, I understand, but again, we do have a comment from the public.
I understand.
that basically says,
Well, with the city, we went through it with, we're counting how many cars we could park in the property that will not affect as far as parking in the streets, affect any incoming traffic and stuff like that. So that was one of the,
I mean, that's a matter of code enforcement and police, I guess, I'm
Correct.
not worried about that. What I do worry about more is if you agree with with the recommendations that are actually put forth, because
course.
these are some of the issues that the public.
I understand, and I'm aware of that, and,
Okay.
I see the effect the cars in there for days, that's not my problem, but I see it in the streets and other shops doing it.
Okay, that was my question.
Question for both, I guess, applicant and staff here, because it sounds like one of the things that's being proposed, you like the site because it has off-street parking, so when you have vehicles that have to be parked, you're not taking up spots on the street, you can park them inside. But it seems like this is saying that even the parking of vehicles overnight inside the property would constitute a major repair. And so all this nice parking that he has, he cannot use it for his customers' vehicles overnight, even inside of his site. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's,
You're aware of that, all
Yes,
that.
sir. I mean, it's a challenge, but,
I just don't want you to go through this whole process, start doing this and then start getting hit with code enforcement.
no, of course not. I'm aware of
You
that.
understand that all that
Yes, sir.
parking, if it's your vehicles, they're allowed there, but your customer vehicles cannot be parked outside overnight.
I
Even on your
understand.
own property, private property.
Correct.
If he has a vehicle and they're parked inside the bay with the door shut, that
In the
doesn't,
building,
in the building.
yeah, but the outside,
This
it
is
looks like you got probably almost 15-20 parking spaces outside. You would not be able to park your customers' vehicles in those spots overnight,
I understand.
and you're okay with that?
Well, because I have the second location, so I could manage, Well, I have the first location, this would be considered a second location.
Yeah, but you wouldn't be able to, vehicles that need to be repaired at the first location, you can't move them. to
I
the
understand,
Parking
yeah.
space, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Board discussion, I don't have any other questions for the applicant, but I guess there's kind of.
Anybody else have a?
I mean, pertinent to that, what you're saying, though, like, some of that has to be off the- or- drop off the side, then,
Yeah, I understand, well, but even without that constitutes that if you're talking about major, if you have a tow truck coming in, dropping off the car at 2 o'clock at night and then leaving it in the street, I believe that is specifically what would be your kind of major stuff, so that's why they don't want it in some of these districts.
Right.
And so I don't think that would be, is that also staff, that would be appropriate for a minor.
situation.
But I think that's a police and code enforcement.
But in terms of planning this, if this was a site where people were, a tow truck was gonna drop off a vehicle at 2 o'clock in the morning. A customer's broken down and he's not gonna get to it the next day. Is that considered major minor? Is that something impacting this?
So I think when we're thinking of the nature of it, you're thinking of a brake shop, your tire shop, which is something quick, you go, you get service and you go. That's why it's not intended for the nature of a minor repair use that you would need to keep cars overnight. Because in our code, you have a much larger lot requirement, to the chairman's point, when you're doing major vehicular repair. And the other thing we're pointing out is, let me go frozen here. The site doesn't have an improved surface for the parking. Well, the front yard, there's, it's overgrown, it doesn't have the required landscaping. So for this site, how we've conditioned it is that all of that would have to be completed and ready in our analysis for this site to support this use. We don't feel like we can just condition that that's going to come later.
I just wanted to note that Elizabeth is remote in.
Okay, so any other comments? from the board?
Because I'd like to have some board discussion, I don't know, a lot back and forth.
Okay. No,
Thank you. So in general, I feel weird about some of it because I believe that the way that it's being presented in the intended use complies with code, and I'm okay with that. I'm skeptical that there's not going to be some things that branch over into the major and that would be intended for this area. And so then it becomes a code enforcement. We're approving something that I think is going to be an issue for code enforcement in the future.
Dan, can you make sure your mic is on?
It is. So, can you hear me?
Yes, just a little bit more.
So in general, reading it on paper, it seems like something to approve. Because it does meet all conditions. I agree that they would have to do all the improvements ahead of time. But it seems like I don't believe that this is a single spot, like a break. So it's really for taking it more general, all the competitors, I think it's. It becomes a code enforcement issue that the parking lot here is apartment overnight. But I don't think there's anything else to do besides that, unless the staff have any kind of comments on that. In terms, I know this entire area has been, especially with regards to automotive, there's been a lot of code enforcement action. Broken down vehicles that are being stored on the street overnight that are, all sorts of stuff in that area become pretty congested.
So we do get a lot of inquiries a lot of times for sites even smaller that cannot accommodate their own parking lot. So the good thing here is they are able to improve it and have that customer parking, which is an advantage to other folks we've spoken to. Yes, you're kind of foreseeing potential code enforcement issues. Unfortunately, that's possible with any use before you. On our end, we try to safeguard as much as possible. We try to do a very strong development order. So if there are issues, that's very easy to cite and enforce being in violation of a development order.
Why?
Okay, can you make sure your mic is on?
My only concern with this project is it really comes from the public comment from the adjoining property owner. I'm not sure that's a basis to deny or to recommend to deny this conditional use permit, but I'll say that's really my only concern with this project, but I'm not necessarily dispositive.
So you can put additional conditions on, or if you feel like there's an issue of compatibility or screening from the adjacent property or something like that, that's something that you could look at from a within your purview for your mitigating impacts to adjacent property.
In our conditions, will require them to have the full perimeter landscaping of the parking area, which they'll supplement. You can kind of see some of it is there already. And in the section the public comment was citing is a residential zoning district. I understand they're envisioning they might have some residential development, but it is abutting mixed use, not an actual residential zoning district.
I think the tough part about it is there's an intangible as to what. Unfortunately, I mean, we're looking at something that had issues in the past. Hard to say that it might not be in the future, but if you're putting these conditions on it and we're meeting those things, and we do have, I've seen code enforcement shut down, shut down, pull the electrical out of it, so it's a mess that they had and all this other stuff. So my case, I guess, is in our police department and code.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't anticipate any issues. I'm not like trying to speculate on whether or not this is more or less likely to become a code issue. I have hesitation when there's an adjoining property owner of a couple different parcels who's basically saying, this business is not the best neighbor. That's kind of how I'm reading his comment, not necessarily what's going to happen in the future. Are we going to have, is this going to become a warehouse district with like lofts? But he's just basically saying this guy may not be the best neighbor. He's attaching things to Google reviews and stuff. So that's the basis of my concern. But I hear what Aaron is saying. I definitely would be receptive. The concern would be mitigated by additional maybe conditions staff could propose. Maybe one or two other conditions that could potentially alleviate the concern from adjoining landowner.
So if we look at 7, A is ensuring we have that landscape buffer, which will include trees and shrubs. The trees are planted 25 feet on center. We're gonna see the chain link fencing and barbed wire removed. New script refuse enclosure, that front yard. Also, having additional shade trees and shrubs. Having an improved surface for the parking lot, striping, those parking areas.
So go back, so I think probably what you're looking for is. What we could do to really ensure, because a code compliant fence could be an aluminum picket. So instead of, we would say new opaque fencing, so that the fencing is solid. And then you could also say that the shade trees will be planted every 25 linear feet. On center, or to provide basically a continuous screen. You don't want your shade trees growing into each other, but they can get closer, so you could say, or you could say every 25 feet on center or closer, depending on the appropriate species recommended separation to provide the continuous screening insofar as feasible. So that's what I would do. So that would give you your trees. This is our code. But that would give you a little bit more than code on that boundary to get the trees a little closer together at full, because you're always going to space them at full size. And then you would require the opaque fencing or a wall if you wanted to require an actual wall versus a fence.
There just might be a little bit of trade-off, because once you put them closer, you might have to do a medium tree rather than a larger tree.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying, it's based on species. type.
Yeah.
So
but-
the on center would be dependent upon, so if they get medium trees, they're gonna be closer. If they're large trees, they may be 25 on center, they may be 20 on center, so it'll be based on the specific species.
And then we were really talking about the fencing abutting the right of way. I don't know if you were referring to if they wanted to require something on the east side to mitigate for the folks across the alley, because that wasn't,
Go back to that, show.
Yeah.
So which. fence?
so, here on the west side of the property, we were talking about getting rid of this, fencing. There actually might be some fencing, but, if there's not, that,
There is.
there is. There is. Okay, so they already have that, so that can help already.
So you could require then, some shade trees on that, and some additional landscaping, so. Or a continuous hedge on that side, which would grow beyond the 6 feet. So you could do a hedge on the interior to,
Right.
and require that to be maintained at a
So-
higher height.
And our conditions are covering basically where I'm hovering over this L that would all have the 5-foot buffer. With the trees and the shrubs, and then the front yard would have trees and shrubs as well.
From my perspective, I know our landscape code is pretty solid.
Yeah.
I don't think necessarily going above and beyond that, that's not as much my concern. Mine was more, and also with the public comment, most of the activities they were referencing. If this is strictly adhered to as a minor center and complies with everything that's in your conditions. That I think even the neighbors' comments were about vehicles being parked overnight, by transmission work. If they're complying with these conditions, I don't really have an issue with that.
Yeah, there's nothing.
So I don't think there's necessarily more conditions are gonna make it any better in terms of the tree spacing or anything like that. I don't think that's the concern. So I'm okay with it as is. I just wanted to kind of raise the issue.
Yeah, I thought the conditions were okay, as written, also.
This is your story, guys, so like whatever you're into, that's fine.
Anything else on the board?
No, I just, if he's gonna buy property, but he, with public comment, got a burden in him versus, vacant property. And it doesn't, going by his word, what he said, doesn't sound like the board shows that it's gonna be, cars all over and as long as you do what you say you're gonna do. I don't have an issue with what's party there and not being in the world.
Okay, you comment?
And we're publishing
I deal with,
Can you come up, please?
to get a second.
and say your name for the record.
Johnson, my husband and I own the property. There is a fence on the back side and we had plants put, in there and the city came and cut them down because, they said they're gonna put in new power poles. So we had bushes all along the back side of the fence and they were taken down by the city of Lake Worth. That's, I was able to stop them before they cut down all of them, but they came in and they cut down most of the bushes, but they are coming back.
Power line,
What?
did you get the new power line?
No, they said it's gonna be 2 years before the new poles go up, but they started coming through and cutting down everything in the alley.
Were the plants on your property or were they on the
They
alley?
were on ours property. Yes.
Call code enforcement. Okay, is there anything else, in public from the board? Do we hear a motion for this project?
I'll move to approve PZB project number 23-005-00006. The staff recommended conditions for conditional use permit requests to establish a minor vehicle service and repair. Use based on the confidence, substantial evidence provided the staff report. Evidence that was public hearing.
Second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Motion passes unanimously.
Good. All right, so PZB project 23-015-0003, consideration of a waiver to allow a new brown changeable copy sign for institutional use at 1901 Polk Avenue South. The property is owned single family residential SFR and has a single family residential SFR future land destination. Staff.
Good evening. Again, this is Abraham Fogel for the record. A little bit of background on the proposal. The Planning and Zoning Board and Hrpb recommended approval of ordinance 23-06, which creates a waiver review process for changeable copy signage for public and institutional uses outside of the city's major thoroughfares. So that's a long way of saying, unless you're on a major thoroughfare in our city, you cannot have an LED sign. Oops, wrong sign.
There's a preview.
Preview. Okay. 2 waivers. All right, sorry about that. Makes more sense now. So the ordinance was presented to the city commission yesterday for first reading. We'll move on to second reading. They did not have any changes to this section, which would impact this application. And this request will utilize these regulations to request a new LED sign for an institutional use, which is a church. So here we have the existing conditions depicted in an aerial view of the property. It's bounded by 12th Avenue South to the north, Cochran Drive to the south, and to the west by Lake Osborne Drive, and to the east we can see the railway. I've zoomed in here where they have their existing freestanding sign, which they will be attaching the LED sign to. Here we have a survey, which is also showing that existing location of the sign. Here we have a rendering of what the new sign would look like. We conducted a preliminary zoning analysis that was included in the staff report. We will do the full zoning analysis at permitting. However, at the size they're proposing, it would meet our zoning regulations. Here are the elevations. And as I mentioned, the ordinance created this new waiver process for you to have this type of signage outside of the city's major thoroughfares. With that, we did create a new waiver criteria, which I will go through quickly. For number one, it is staff's analysis that this is the minimum or smallest modification needed. They're not in a major thoroughfare, and they're asking to have this type of signage. For number two, refers to negatively impacting property owners and protected land uses. It is in the single family zoning. When we published the staff report, we did not have any written comments. Since then, we have received public comment, and that will be available to you after the presentation. But in regards to the zoning, churches are an anticipated use in the single family zoning district. And this type of signage is supportive to that use. For number three, the sign area and location will comply with the city sign code as conditioned. And overall, we've seen that signage technology has evolved over time, and many institutional uses have moved on from those older message board signs that you would change the letters, and they've moved on to LED signs. And for number four, we do find that it would be consistent with our comprehensive plan, since it's supportive of a use that was envisioned for the zoning district. For number five, it would not be applicable since we're not seeing any changes to the uses or existing buildings. So therefore, we find that it is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the new language proposed in the ordinance. And staff is recommending approval subject to conditions of approval. The conditions are provided on this slide, and I believe the applicant can also answer any additional questions.
The existing sign is two-sided, right? Is this also proposed to be two-sided for an LED?
The applicant?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. You wanna, yeah, you might have questions.
Hi, I'm Allie Enberg with Art Sign Company. I'm at 2100 Northeast, 42nd Court in Lighthouse Point. So what we are proposing, I mean, honestly, what's there right now does have changeable copy, but it's manual changeable copy. So it's just a little bit antiquated. What we're suggesting is a digital display to replace that changeable copy. As you know, with any institutions, you have multiple events and things like that. LED digital display is a great alternative to just hanging banners and putting signs up. It's just more aesthetically pleasing. Yeah. And then as far as the impact for the community, this digital display faces a lake. It doesn't face any homes. It's not going to be, it's not going to be like, flashing lights and animation. It's literally just to allow the community to see the upcoming events.
One side, that's what I was asking about the two sides, because one side it looks like it's facing the lake, the other side is facing towards your residential homes. Is that?
It's not two residential homes. It's basically kind of at the 95 overpass. So it's not, I mean, and listen, these LED displays, the brightness can be adjusted as necessary. So if you guys want a lesser intense, illumination, and that goes from daytime to nighttime, etc. So it can be really low kind of illumination, based on what your recommendations would be.
And I've included in the conditions of approval because our code does have regulations for this type of signage. So that was repeated here, which impacts how it will function.
Do you have a, maybe for the board to help them understand how brightness is better than what your proposed what the proposed brightness is, and how it can be, managed?
Can you give me a second?
I will also mention too, that if it is so bright that it becomes a traffic hazard, that is a code case. So it can't blink, it can't be overly bright,
Of course.
can't be disco lights, it has to be, and the signage has to, cannot, so the sign that you see has to remain for 60 seconds at a minimum. So you can't.
yeah. So it's based on Kelvin's. If I need to get you guys the actual like specifics, I can get you the actual specifics, brightness wise. But basically, the highest level of brightness is typically for like stadiums and things like that. I mean, it can go from, you know, as bright as that down to literally, just like a soft, warm light, like in the community. I don't have the Kelvin chart with me today.
Is there a timing on the light? Could you set that so that it would dim?
Absolutely. There's a time clock that we can set up with the illumination, and it can change it to the brightness, you know, that's necessary. If it's going on during the day, obviously it's going to be brighter because the sun's out. You can't see it as well. Doesn't affect traffic. It's just based on, you know, the light that comes, you know, that's from early morning to dusk and evening. Literally you can decrease it by, you know, 70%. So it doesn't affect, you know, the community or anybody driving.
Do you have any public comment on this?
Yes, we do. I've included it. We have it before you as well, but we have some comments. And the first comes from Matthew Portilla at 1301 Cochrane Drive. He's asking that you please do not approve the variance for the illuminated ground changeable sign. He lives next door, and in the 10 years he's lived there, the sign has never provided any valuable information. This week, the sign has read, "God, the clicker picker upper," presumably taken down to a cease and desist order by Procter & Gamble, the parent company of Bounty, and it is read "Perfect Pottery," which I'm assuming is code for something. This sign does not fit with the character of the community, and the attempt at quippy messages provide no value. Lake Osborne Drive has no other permanent changeable signage. That is the end of that comment. The second comment comes from Ramsey Stevens, and he's located at 618 South K Street. And he says, as a concerned citizen, I urge you not to allow an electric sign on in a single family residential neighborhood. While I respect the church's improvement goals, this begs the simple question: would any of us like an electric sign that was allowed next to any of our homes? The decisions you make about one neighborhood will impact all of us. The introduction of an electric billboard in any residential zone will call into question our city's equitable treatment of all of our residents. And that's it.
And back to the square footage share. In terms of what's being, so the drawing that was up there shows 22 square feet of sign area, and everything allowable is 34 square feet. Based on the overall property frontage. If we have both sides of the sign, it may be probably.
So I think they weren't maximizing. They actually are allowed more than that. And you're not vesting the size, you're vesting a changeable copy sign. They are still have to comply fully at permitting with any limitations.
But that being said, the waiver criteria does say the minimum required. So if you feel like the sign is a little too large, the changeable copy portion, that could be within your purview. And Elizabeth, unless I'm restating, if you feel like it's not, that you could look at recommending a reduction in that. Or if lighting was concerned, you should recommend the timing of the sign as well.
And to your question, this frontage allows up to 150. So even counting both sides, they're under. This was their illustration. But they're a lot more than they're showing.
under 50 for total signage, and 25% of that can be changeable, right? So that would be the 34 square foot, the entire property would be changeable sign. And I just, correct me if I'm wrong, because I didn't see, I kind of, I'm assuming that it's both sides, and I heard you, but looking through this, I don't see anywhere where it seems to actually say that was the proposal to put a screen on both sides or
Yeah.
facing the.
No, both sides. And just as a consideration, the sign that's there now is illuminated. It's not LED, illuminated, but just like I said before, we can adjust the illumination to what is existing now at that Calvin rate. So it wouldn't disrupt the community, as they've already had that illuminated sign within in their community.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you. This is Elizabeth Lenahan, City Attorney's Office. I just wanted to jump in and let you know that the conditions that Aaron has proposed are appropriate.
Put the bottle down.
And while you may
We can't hear you.
consider the public comment regarding the can't hear me?
No.
You sounded
Sorry,
like slow motion. Try it again.
the, while you can consider the content, yes.
Elizabeth, you want me to call you on the phone and then you can speak on the phone through the microphone?
Doing my best.
But I'm gonna call her.
While you can consider,
Can you mute her? It was so hilarious. I can't even tell you. I'm gonna put you on speaker.
She's out.
And then I'm gonna feed you into the microphone, okay? Okay, go ahead.
All right, I'm hoping this is better. So what I was saying is that the conditions that Aaron has proposed are appropriate, and I want to make sure that you know that while you can consider the public comment on the content of the sign, you cannot regulate the content of the sign. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about your conditions.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
I had a couple questions. One is for the applicant. The current sign, is it one of those signs where you actually stick the little letters up, or is it?
Manual copy.
It's manual, okay. And,
All right. Bye.
so I guess this would go to Abraham, could you walk me through the, basically the history of the ordinance? And so they're allowing these signs for certain businesses in certain areas. But institutional uses are not among those newly allowed, businesses.
Yeah, I have a copy here. Show you the language. Essentially, you could only have this type of signage on our major thoroughfares.
And
And
only for institutional use. No other uses.
mhm. So we do actually have a few churches not on major thoroughfares. Some of them are in single family. And this is not the first time this has come up. So we created this process so that on a case by case basis, they could come to the board and you could make your findings to see if it was appropriate.
So to follow up, and I'm trying to address what the second commenter, not the person who mentioned Dr. Hamel. The other comment about if we do this, we would be accused of, disparate treatment if we're allowing, this sign for this use. Are you aware of any of the other institutional use of the churches that have received approval for this type of sign in single family areas?
We haven't, we've had them requested.
Requested.
And because the bulk of the churches in the city that have lit changeable copy signs have the original changeable copy signs that are lit. It's, so the new technology is that they're basically not making those that type of changeable copy sign, they really don't do that anymore. It's really the industry and everything's going to digital. So when people get to the end of the life of their changeable copy sign, they're looking for a potential replacement. So we brought this forward to the city commission in a package of changes, and they seemed supportive generally of the idea of creating the waiver. We have a waiver process. We've expanded the waiver process slightly to include this types of signage to allow people to modernize their signage, their existing changeable copy sign, not on a major thoroughfare. So.
And to address your earlier question, I was looking for the code section. So for ground signs, if they're back, our code says if they're back to back, that's considered one sign face. So that's how they're getting that.
You only count the area of one side of it.
It's considered one. We're not double counting like two separate signs.
Right, I can understand where, like, under number of signs, I can understand this would be counted as one sign, not as two. But if you've got one monitor on one side that's 20 square feet, and on one on the other side that's 20 square feet, you've got 40 square feet sign.
So that's just the way the code's constructed. If you feel in this instance, that's not the minimum, and that there might be issues with the neighborhood, and you would like to recommend only one screen on one
Maybe
side, and that
one
is within
facing.
your purview to condition the thing. But the way we do our code is, that's how it's been for forever.
Where I'm waiting on this, I don't have an issue with the changeable. I think that the difference between the changeable sign using the new technology and a changeable sign using the old technology is what they, I believe, it's in the conditions of, they call the dwell time. So this could potentially cycle every 60 seconds under the code. And so that's a very different thing when you have something in your window that's every 60 seconds. You've got one image that's just got a little bit of text, and the other one is a lot brighter. Even if the brightness is set at night level, you've got a light that's changing going into your window every 60 seconds. So that could be kind of different, you know, lights and flashing, not flashing, obviously, in 60 seconds, but
I think they're addressing that.
Yeah,
well, the conditions allow for it to change every 60 seconds. Yeah, so that's, so to me, typically this would be required to be on a major thoroughfare, not on a major thoroughfare. I think Lake Osmore Drive is kind of a little bit of a, more of at least, where you don't have anything across the street. But 12th Avenue South, there is single family homes directly across from it. Where you have two different roads. One of them is kind of, you could say, a thoroughfare-ish, but the other one to me doesn't seem that way. I would support this if it was on one side facing towards the lake, but not facing towards the homes. That's kind of.
I agree with your interpretation of it.
Your interpretation of the allowable area. In other words, you know,
You can't agree with his interpretation of the allowable area, because the code expressly
I can't.
states you cannot, because the code says the opposite.
So
So
I
it's
think
not, it's not an interpretation. It says both sides shall count as one side, but what you can say is that they're not asking for the minimum, and which you can restrict.
which is the first criteria that we
the
drafted.
minimum though, then in terms of the minimum.
Minimum net. Right, you would say they can achieve the changeable copy sign with one side facing the lake, if that's where you're going with it, tied back to criteria number one.
That's within your purview, is it the minimum allowed? So you can say, or the minimum necessary. So if you don't believe it's the minimum necessary, that they could get their changeable copy and not impact. But you can't, the way our code is just the way that our code is, and this is not a modification to the area. This is a modification to the type of signage. So you could say that the area, that because it's two-sided, that it's a net increase in area of total light, and that the light will reflect back onto. But as far as the allowable sign area, that is a calculated value. Does that make sense?
Sorry.
I just don't want us to be like, I don't want it on record. The planning and zoning board doesn't agree with the way the code, the interpretation of the code.
But
So we just have to just say you don't comply with number one, and that you could have less digital area.
I could support that.
Okay.
If you feel that
You're the only
mitigates,
one that's confused.
I just want us to be careful of being like, that's not what the code says, because it does.
so if you feel like that mitigates any concerns from the residents, because that side just faces the lake.
And there's another thing that it won't impact adjacent property, like it won't impact your neighbors.
Right, so number two, so you can tie it to number one and number two, you feel like the side that's facing, what is it? Is it 12?
One question, are there any, I remember back, years ago, and that sign is very lively, someone does change it quite a bit, puts quirky little messages on it, when I drive by, and you see it quite a bit. But are there any, leftover hotel motels on that road?
Not specifically as you go under 95 into that neighborhood, it's all residential.
It is residential.
Yeah, so that wall kind of blocks, and there's I think a cemetery, like right over the bridge. Kind of
Not
thing.
that, but it's along Lake Osborne, I know that there was at one point, and I think it was converted into condo, things like that, but, that was just another point of signage on that street, but I think that's the only one. I think the big issue, and I would agree a little bit with the amount of, square footage allowed, but one of the reasons is you can actually have two messages on the sign, right? And if they go and they simultaneously go at 60 seconds, you can cycle these things into many different messages that go on, but that would be an opportunist type of view to have two different messages on the same piece. The fact that they are by a residential neighborhood, that's comment is a little bit distressing to me. I think the limit on one of them would be better displayed in terms of what the signage would do, especially for the church. And it would do a much better job at the God's side, I would believe.
I think that's a good point about how it could be different messages. I mean, it doesn't really.
But all of those things you guys can give to us with conditions, correct?
Absolutely.
I mean, you guys can say that it can only cycle every 5 minutes. You can tell me that it can't be animated.
The technology could do what it does, right? And I get it. You guys can, the machine does what it does. The issue is that there's a bigger issue of the neighborhood and what type of, how many broadcasts you're putting out at the same time. And that's my big issue. But, I don't know. Hear about it the rest of the board.
There's a lot of churches in this town.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are in tighter neighborhoods than this. And I just see us opening a big can of worms. With, there's just a lot of churches everywhere.
Institutional. And I think the condition that within the code, they would have to be on a major thoroughfare. This one is being considered, even though it's not on a major thoroughfare, by receiving, this waiver. But, and to me, again, like I drive that road, like Osborne Drive feels a little bit more, 12th Avenue is kind of a fairly busy street as well. There definitely are single family homes. And so to me, if we're going to allow it on the street, and we're not gonna allow it on the, over on Lakeside, the church that's over there somewhere, which I would agree, right there, you're gonna have houses, you're not gonna want bright lights and, changing the copy there, but that's definitely not a thoroughfare. This one is kind of closer. It's not designated as a major.
It's a collector.
I agree.
That's the word you're looking for. It's a collector.
But again, I would 100% be against it.
Designated as a major thoroughfare or not?
It's not a major thoroughfare,
It's a
so
minor thoroughfare.
it's a, it's a collector.
I mean, that's a good distinction. though.
Yeah.
That is a good distinction. I mean, if this is the first time this issue has come up, I mean, if we are going to, I mean, it's my opinion, if we are gonna grant the waiver, there should be some type of distinction to prevent, like you said, bright flashing sign. Like, I think the sign out front is just my personal opinion. I don't think it looks great outside City Hall. I think it looks kind of like an acid trip when I drive past it. So I don't think that would look great. I mean, in some of these front yards of churches and single family neighborhoods, I think it is important that we draw a distinction.
So I think your strength is, if you go back to number 2, is when you're considering your conditions, if you'd like to approve this, on the one side, because you're already in your discussions, or you're creating this idea that Lake Osborne Drive is different than 12th Avenue, right? South. So this is what I'm hearing from the board, is that there's a distinction between the two roadways, and that maybe one is more appropriate for this type of signage than the other one, where the other is more of a local road. Lake Osborne is more of a collector, which this could potentially be appropriate on. So the other thing I think that the applicant brought up as well is that you could, because it is still a residential neighborhood, maybe it doesn't have as much lighting, is that you could have a time in which the sign turns off at night. Which is a common condition, because, you know, so then you're limiting light pollution in the, you know, maybe after 8 p.m. or something. And then the other thing too, I think she spoke to, which was that it could cycle every 5 minutes. And I know you said animation, but animation is not allowed because you can't, everything has to be still for 60 seconds. So that would be a very slow animation. You'd be like,
Right. Right.
it would be like Elizabeth, yes.
I think part of the reason Lake Osborne and why I'm willing, because I think in general, I would almost be against it. But I think I'm willing to consider it because there is also nothing across the street at Lake Osborne. So it's not just that it's a collector kind of road, but there is not any properties across the street that are being impacted. So I feel uncomfortable approving it of that. I do think in general, I think shutting off at night is a great thing. People that are enjoying the park and stuff like that. So I think I would be agreeable to a condition also that would say from the 8 o'clock to 5 a.m.
Dusk and dawn.
I would say 6 a.m.
Yeah.
maybe into 6 a.m.
Change the.
Dusk and dawn.
It is more just.
That changes.
The problem is it's an existing like planter and concrete structure that we're going to be fitting an LED display into.
Yeah.
And you can't really,
But you have to.
I mean, literally you're pulling foundation,
I mean, we have AI, can't they?
unfortunately. We're trying, yeah, what we were trying to do is to upgrade their, you know, signage and make it more
I'm gonna make
current
that product.
and try to stay within the parameters of the city and the code.
So I would just say, I think your discussions are very germane and important, that you've been bringing up at, talking about, you know, the difficulty with this type of issue. It's something that we struggled with, as staff when we created the waiver process. We wrote the rules so we could punt it to you all and make the hard decisions. Because some of the things you're bringing up are very true. Sometimes, like if there's a very small church that's basically in a house, in the midst of a single family, a changeable copy sign in that location is probably not the most appropriate, but we have some quite larger churches that are tucked into and that are facing different roadways that already have large changeable copy signs. And so this is why it is not in the code as allowed, but rather through a waiver process that can be discussed through a public forum where we can hear from the neighbors and look at these issues in detail. So I think all of your discussions are really great, and wherever you decide, this is specific to the case. And Elizabeth, we can, let's see if she's texting me. We can put her on the speaker, but if you state the specific site conditions relative to the waiver, if you decide to grant it, those can become, we can look at that as a general like kind of guidepost, but they don't become what's the word I'm looking for?
Precedent.
They don't become precedent. So because you're speaking to the specifics of the site and the case. So in that sense, you don't have to worry, you're then allowing every future sign, but you do need to say because of these specific conditions for this particular sign, this is, if you were thinking of allowing it on the one side, this is only why we're gonna allow it. And if you don't think it warrants that, then you should say that, and then you should deny it, so.
One question on the technology side of the sign. I know the old plasma TVs and old monitors, you're always worried about screen burnout if that image was up.
Right.
Do we still, is that still a relevant thing in terms of if we said one message every hour, you know?
So these LED screens aren't like your TVs or the things that you have in your house. These are all based on LED modules. So when things go out, and this particular company that we've hired to do this digital display has a warning system when things are starting to go wrong, and it shoots it to that company, who in turn call me and say, hey, this module's out. We're sending you a new one. You know, have your guys come and change it out. So no, I mean, it's gotten a lot better over the years and being able to fix those kinds of issues. And typically, and specifically with this, we get 4 of those modules that we just get with the display. Now that's with the 2 different screens, so you get 2 per side. So when something starts to go out, Dax calls us and says, hey, we're getting an error message. These things are about to go out, and we can go and kind of mitigate it before it actually becomes an eyesore or a problem.
How long is your wait? You're with the sign companies?
Yes.
Is this the church?
So we got Dax as well as us to agree to a 7-year warranty on this stuff. So for the next 7 years, anything that goes wrong with the display, us and the digital display company will be replacing the modules as needed.
How long have you guys been in business?
We've been in business for 75 years.
Well, you know,
Maybe. We might know
It's
something.
all right.
Kind of the summary is where I would make a motion, but I would add 3 conditions to it. One being that the signage only faces Lake Osborne, 2, that it shuts off from 8 PM to 6 AM. And 3 would be to increase the cycle time from a minimum of about 60 seconds to probably 10 minutes per side. You know, that way, because the idea is you're replacing something where someone would go out there and change the letters on the sign, and they're not doing that every 10 minutes, so it's not the idea to have kind of a revolving billboard. I think we could go longer than 10 minutes, but I don't want to impact the technology and that if they have to change screen every once in a while or not.
From what I know, the light is on, when they have the sign, changeable sign, that's on, it's a lit light all night, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. it is. I would agree with that, except for the 8 o'clock thing, because now it's still light a lot of times at 8 o'clock, right? So it's almost like, yeah, as soon as, the light is, people are used to having this lit whole sign. I don't see the difference.
So we can adjust that timing based on the time of year. Obviously, these time clocks do these things automatically, so we would just set the time clock to meet when it, like from dusk to dawn, you know what I mean, it's off.
So I would amend that condition to say 2 hours.
That's so done.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be fine. They're gonna, people get a better deal. It's gonna be dark. So,
Well, and listen, these LED displays,
There's
I
so
mean,
many people tomorrow.
for especially like, you know,
Yes.
community stuff, it's not something that they're completely used to, especially like in their backyard. So it's gonna, you know, have a little bit of pushback, but I think once you see, you know, what the actual function of it is and you know, how it works and like how it's not going to be a nuisance to the community, you know, people will.
okay, do we have anything from the public? Anything else?
We already did public comment, right? Okay, then I'll move to approve PTV project number 23-015-00003 with staff recommended conditions for a waiver, including the 3 additional conditions that the signage only be installed on the face, that the changeable digital copy only face Lake Osborne Drive, that it be turned off 2 hours after sunset and can turn back on an hour before sunrise, and that the minimum cycle time is extended from 60 seconds to 10 minutes.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Motion carries unanimously.
Those are tough, you know? That's why we wrote it, so you guys get to you guys get to be the deciders on that.
All right, moving along, PPP project 23-006-00003. Consideration of alcoholic beverage district waiver to allow package sales of alcoholic beverages at Presidente Supermarket at 2505 North Dixie Highway. Subject site is zoning mixed use, Dixie Highway, NVDH, and the future land use of that mixed use. Mixed use. It's not a common putting it on that route. Okay, staff.
Good evening. So let's get some background. Presidente Supermarket will open soon at 2505 North Dixie Highway, which is within the Arbor Square Plaza. In conversations with the applicant, they indicated their business model includes package sales of beer and wine, which is typical for grocers, and they are requesting to have that as well. The city's regulations pertaining to alcoholic beverage establishments require a 500-foot separation from other establishments that sell alcohol and protected land uses, which that includes churches, schools, parks, libraries, and residential neighborhoods. At this location, you'll be 500 feet from the city's Spillway Park, the Sunset Ridge and College Park residential neighborhoods, a pizzeria within the plaza that sells beer, and Family Dollar, which recently did come through the process. It was recommended approval and it received final approval from the city commission. And in these situations, our code does establish a waiver process that's already been in the code for a while, unlike the last application that you reviewed. And Family Dollar, as I mentioned, went through the process back in April and May. So here we have a site plan of the property highlighted. You'll see the location for the supermarket. Moving on to the analysis, when it pertains to granting these waivers for alcoholic beverage establishments, there is specific criteria. It was outlined in the staff report, which indicated the proposed beer and wine package sales will be accessory to the supermarket use. There is not a designated historic property here, so criterion number 3 would not be applicable. And staff has added several conditions of approval so that the business operates within the allowable hours of sale to ensure the proposed use is not detrimental to the surrounding community. Therefore, staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Board reviews this information to determine whether to waive the prohibition of packaged alcoholic sales within 500 feet of the other businesses in Arbor Square, the residential properties, and the protected land uses. If you choose to recommend approval to the city condition, we've drafted conditions of approval provided on the slide. That concludes my presentation, and the applicant is here with us.
Before we go further, I just wanted to note that in addition to this recommendation this evening, when this goes before the city commission, we want to get this discussion from you as well as the city commission. Is there has become, grocery stores have evolved into a typical model where many grocery stores offer beer and wine sales within the grocery store. They're requesting beer and wine sales within a grocery store. So like pretty much any Publix you go to, there's a wine section where you can grab a bottle of wine, or they sell beer there. That has become more and more a typical way to operate a grocery business. And so what we're looking for is kind of a discussion of, is this okay here because you just approved Family Dollar? Is this not okay here because there's another one? And then if this is okay, the next point of discussion beyond this application that we'd like to take to the city commission for some final direction is, do we want to continue to ask for alcohol distance waivers for grocery stores with accessory beer and wine sales? Or are we okay if beer and wine sales happen in accessory capacity to grocery stores? And if so, is there a concept, like, is there a level of accessory that we're good with? Because obviously we don't want a grocery store with 40% alcohol sales, right? Like, that's not, we're talking a very small percentage of their shelves, which we would be cool with if it wouldn't require a waiver. So those are some things to start, get the thinking caps going while we consider the application, because this discussion will feed into then this discussion with the city commission. And if we need to come back and make code changes, because if we're going to approve every waiver with beer and wine sales accessory to grocery stores, then we're kind of just creating a lot of work for ourselves. So it depends on how you feel, and we'd like to hear from you.
I 100% support this and support in the future that this doesn't have to come before us. I think this is kind of a no-brainer to me.
Well, let's hear from the applicant first. We'll get it.
I am Catherine Valdez, 14252 Southwest 177th Street, Miami. And thank you very much. That pretty much summed it up. Our model consists of having beer and wine as part of our sales in general. I'm sorry, I'm rough from a cold. And we have very strict rules for our cashiers as to what they can authorize any alcoholic beverage sales to anybody over 21 only. They have to, with our system, with our POS system, they have to take the ID and actually punch it into the system. So there's no getting around it. It just, the transaction won't happen unless it's entered. We also have restrictions with what they can do as far as just eyeballing is not allowed. It doesn't matter if you have this much gray hair, I have to give them my license. And they all know who I am. So they'll be in big trouble if they don't ask me. Is there anything I can do to?
Could you maybe just to help us with the greater discussion as well, how much of your floor area, your sales area, not the back of house, but the front of house is typically allocated to beer and wine sales for your model?
It's about a 16, 20-foot cooler. And some shelves, like pallets, a couple of
But
pallets.
like as a percent of your wholesale floor, would it be like 2%? Like, is it, it's gonna be under 10%?
Yeah, so it'll be under 10%, maybe 5% or so. Not really 2%, but maybe 5%. There'll be a section. There'll be a section for it.
Is that like a general grocery store kind of rule?
Mhm. Yeah, we have all the departments, of course, produce, meat, dairy, beer and wine.
But I mean, like the grocery store association, you Publix, Winn-Dixie, all kind of follow the same percentage.
We all follow the same models, and the percentages, they're larger, of course. But yeah, it should be about 5% or so. It's not more. And we're also gonna have the very best Cuban coffee in town, so just putting it up there.
And you're not gonna serve the beer and wine on.
No, absolutely not. No.
Trick question. You passed the trick question.
No, sorry. So this is a model that's worked for us over the last 25 years. We're almost 40 stores now between Homestead and Orlando, actually, at this point. So, and we're looking to provide more services to other communities, but we like to keep it close knit and hire locally, and people that work closest, live closest to the business. It helps them, helps us, and everybody stays happy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Like Dan, I don't have any issues with this specific application or in general, this type of waiver. I mean, it's just not something that I personally heard a well articulated reason for the justification for the type of restriction. I mean, I understand how some places and sometimes in history, that's a good reason for these rules to come out, but in this situation, I'm kind of on board with that.
I just wanted to ask for some clarification from staff on a couple of things. First, I mean, I assume that it's established that this is strictly permission for beer and wine and would not be any type of hard liquor sales.
Yes, and if you would like, we can actually tweak number one, or you can add one to just make it very clear. It's, package sales of beer and wine, no on-site consumption specific to Presidente supermarket.
I was just assuming it would be a different license anyway. Is that correct?
Right, there are, I believe, 2 APS. Yeah, it would be a different license.
Then I don't think we need a.
Okay.
That's already. Yeah, that's fine. So then the other thing was, with a 500 feet distance, I mean, we talked about a pizza restaurant that serves beer and wine that's consumed on the premises. So I wasn't sure how that works, because it seems like that would be a different type of license also. I mean, obviously, you can have restaurants next door to each other that serve beer and wine, so what's the distinction?
So that one's within the plaza. Our code is not distinguishing the type of alcohol beverage establishment. And if it's just a standalone restaurant, where 51% or more of the sales are food, we just consider that a restaurant. And a restaurant that functions in that way is not subject to this type of waiver. We don't consider it a bar, essentially. So that we only brought up the pizzeria because it had that license to serve the beer. And we just wanted to just give context for that plaza. So you understood, are there other locations on this site where people can be consuming or buying alcohol?
Oh, I see. So the pizzeria was not the establishment where the 500 feet came into.
We were giving context of just in that plaza where you could consume or purchase.
And it's not just alcohol establishments, it's also protected land uses and residential properties.
Right.
And so if you want to go to the aerial, and this is what we discussed with Dollar General too, is. We have the,
Pull it up.
yeah, but this is basically in a plaza that is set back, what was it, like 150 feet from the front property line? To access residential, you have to go out onto the arterial, come back on a street and go back behind it, or you have to cross Dixie Highway. So really, if you're gonna walk to get an alcoholic beverage, you really gotta be committed to the process. I mean, it's gonna be you're gonna really be like, I'm walking to go buy a bottle of wine and take it back to my townhouse. So, and then the park is then across the street or behind the townhomes. So that's another protected land.
I bring a motion. Nobody's still discussing it. I move to recommend approval of PZB project number 23-006-00003 of the alcohol distance waiver for the sale of packaged beer and wine based on the data and analysis in the staff report and the testimony made in the public hearing.
Here's a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So what is your feeling?
Motion carries unanimously.
What is the feeling on potentially changing the code if it's accessory, let's say 10% or less of the sales floor area for beer and wine? To no longer require a waiver.
I would.
Okay,
I would go. Personally, I think that the idea of the 500 feet between two establishments, like I understand the protected areas. But I always kind of found that weird that if you got an area and somebody puts in a gas station that's selling something and then somebody else can't open a business within that radius, it's kind of I can understand that you have some exclusions for parks. So residential, but for me, I think that's something that is.
well, some of this is because when you have a full package or alcohol, like a liquor store. Sometimes liquor stores have certain externalities on impacts on an area that when they are clustered in a group can be compounded with those issues. And those can be related to loitering and other things, which is where the idea of the separation between the package sales comes because of those impacts. And so, and that's why kind of, looking at the grocery stores, we were like, hey, beer and wine only, and just a little bit, tiny bit. And then they would be exempt for, like the restaurants are exempt. So if you have a Olive Garden, you can open up an Olive Garden and I don't know, a Tony Roma's, and they can both have full bars as long as they're selling 51%, they can be right next to each other.
How does the gas stations, as I would, because a lot of gas stations will have, cold beer at gas stations.
They are still going to have the waiver process.
So if there's two gas stations that share an intersection, which is pretty common, one of them would have to get a waiver, but whoever's first.
You're only out of it if you're a restaurant, essentially.
Pretty much anybody in the city at this point, because we have so many alcohol sales. If you want to sell alcohol, you're going to get a waiver. So in that hypothetical, both gas stations are getting waiver. They're both near.
Because you're gonna be by a residential neighborhood, you're gonna be by a park, you're gonna be by another establishment, so it's all the new ones that will come in front of us, they need it.
Everybody gets a waiver or they don't open, pretty much where we are now.
I'm sorry, I'm a little concerned. I have to be somewhere at just after 8. I don't want to lose a quorum.
Oh, we're on the corner.
No, we need you for the last item.
Let's go.
Need a-
Yeah,
Okay,
We should do that next then.
Want to do the last item now?
yes.
let's do that. The one, you gotta read outside.
Well, the project number 2201400019, is that correct?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. Major site plan and sustainable bonus incentive program request to construct a mixed-use building containing commercial space and 4 residential units. The sustainable bonus incentive program requests an additional 3 stories total. The subject site is on mixed-use Dixie Highway and has a future land designation of mixed-use east. Staff.
Sorry, I'm just gonna distinguish, we have someone joining virtually. Peter, your item will come next.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Scott Rodriguez with the Planning and Zoning Department. The item before you is Cotton Architecture and Design's request for consideration of a major site plan and sustainable bonus incentive program request to construct a mixed-use building containing commercial space and 4 residential units located at 1432 North Dixie Highway. The sustainable bonus incentive program request is for an additional story to total 3 stories. Here are the existing conditions. The subject site is located on the southeast corner of North Dixie Highway and 15th Avenue North and is within the mixed-use Dixie Highway zoning district. The proposed uses and site improvements will not negatively impact the existing surrounding properties and uses. Proposed changes are harmonious and compatible with the existing mixed-use area. The applicant is proposing a 3-story, 4-unit mixed-use development on a 0.218 acre lot with the purpose of improving the area. The building is designed with a ground floor commercial space and residential units on the 2nd and 3rd floors. Each residential unit will have a private garage that is accessed from the rear of the property abutting the alley. Landscaping of the perimeter buffers is designed to complement the architectural style of the building. The proposed landscaping is generally consistent with the city's landscape regulations and major thoroughfare design guidelines. The next few slides, we're looking at architectural renderings and elevations. The proposed contemporary architectural style of the building is appropriate and in harmony with the surrounding residential and non-residential area. The applicant is asking for bonus height, which is less than the maximum allowances that can be permitted for height through a sustainable bonus within the zoning district. The value of the required improvements for the SBIP bonus area is $21,570. 50% of that is required to be paid to the city, and 50% of that will be provided via qualifying improvements. And I did want to note that the proposed energy appliances and low flow water fixtures that were provided by the applicant can be considered as part of the overall green building certification, such as green globes or Florida Green Building. Project is consistent with the comprehensive plan, strategic plan, city's LDR as condition and conditional use standards. Therefore, staff is recommending approval with conditions. And that concludes my presentation.
with that, we do a standard condition, which is if they decide not to do the green building and they want to pay instead, they can convert that into a permit. So these are the ideas that they're proposing to do when they actually do construction documents. If they find it's more feasible for them to just pay the 21,000 as opposed to do the green building, then they can choose that path. Applicant.
Is there any public comment on this one?
Mary, let me go,
I
but let the
I don't
applicant speak.
think so.
We don't think so.
Hello, we represent Content Architecture and Design. I'm Fatima Masawi.
Fernandez.
We are at 826 South Federal Highway, Lakewood, Florida. Do you have any questions, Chris, or do you want us to present it to you? I mean, he did a good job presenting it already, but in terms of our firm, we've had a history with this lot, actually. I just remembered now as he was presenting, but the previous owner did come up to us and they were thinking of doing something. The existing lot is vacant at the moment. There was a single family home previously, and before that, before the current owners, there was a previous owner that came to us. They tried to do something and then they let go of the property and they let it go, which was sad, you know. And then we were happy to have another client come and actually want to utilize the lot and really contribute to the community. Improve the appearance of the current lot as it is now, of course.
And we've also been working along with staff on the site plan and some of the major components, the parking, the ADA, the refuse. And we've come to what we have here today that meets those requirements while still continuing the landscape buffer on both the north and south ends of the property.
I will add to what the applicant says. This is a challenging site because it's not a big site. So to get the parking and the refuse and ADA access and to meet the build to and the landscaping requirements on two sides was definitely a challenge. And we pushed them really hard and they rose to that challenge and coming before with a site plan that doesn't require any variances.
Yeah, it was important for us to really keep the concept going, which is we did want to keep the type of design, which is if you look at the plans, it's somewhat of a townhome, like a modern townhome, because you do have a retail space on the first floor, but you have your entry in the back, you have a garage, and then you can go upstairs to your living kitchen area, and then there are bedrooms, 2 bedrooms upstairs on the 3rd level. And you have terraces all around, bigger terraces on the 2nd floor. And with what he mentioned as well, like with all these changes that we needed to do, we just really wanted to make sure that the concept still stayed, because while we were trying to make sure that parking and such, we wanted to still keep the parking garages available and such, which we're happy to make it all work out. Yeah.
What was the refuse? How does that work?
So there's a garbage area, if you can see on the north right behind the ADA space.
Oh, there.
Yes, that's just the final spot that we.
That's going to have a masonry wall around it, so it would not be seen on the street. And it would also match the aesthetics of the design of the building.
And there's vegetation all around it as well. That's required and we increased it to make sure it's not really apparent.
So they're not going to be able to do a full service restaurant here because they're not going to have a dumpster. And there was just no way to site a dumpster with this much residential on the property. And then Abe just brought up to me that that you're not seeing a conditional use permit because the retail spaces are below our thresholds to require use approvals. So anything that they do will have to fit in with a use that does not require a dumpster application, which is a lot, but.
Yeah, so essentially what they'll be using bins or carts, and what that allows is greater flexibility on where they place that for non-pickup days. When you're doing the dumpster, has to be an area that's accessible for public works, so it's more limiting when you go with the dumpster.
from board members? Any board discussion? Okay, ready for a motion?
Thank you.
I move to approve with conditions request for the major site plan and sustainable bonus incentive program. Request for the project located at 1432 North Dixie Highway, based upon the competent and substantial evidence provided in the staff report and in the testimony at the public hearing.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion in a second. All those in favor? Aye. It's unanimous. Motion passes.
Staff, make sure that the record reflects that Mr. Compton abstained on that vote.
Thank you, Elizabeth. We will.
Question about procedure, because one left the room, would he have been able to present the
No.
project by himself?
No.
No, okay.
And I will also say for the record that Juan had nothing to do with representing the project to us, or speaking with us about the project, or talking to us in any manner about the project. So we did not have any conversations with him whatsoever about this project.
And being on the board with him, I never knew anything about it.
No, I didn't even.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
So if you're like Juan and you get too many projects on the board that you're on, then we're like, okay, maybe this is not your right board. So, but occasionally, you know,
We need this professional too.
right, so that's the balance. So, we unfortunately lost an HRPD member because every meeting they were presenting a project and they were a one-person shop, and we were like, you can't really do that. So he unfortunately had to resign. He's a great board member, and we still miss him, but, you know, that's the thing, is that you can't represent something when you're on the board, and then you all, you know, there's also, it's better, that's why he's outside. It's not because we don't like him and we put him in the corner, but because he's in a timeout, but it's better just as well, because you know him, you cannot see him and his reaction here in the chambers. There's no interaction at all during the item. So, and I want to thank Zaid for letting us know that you had a time conflict to make sure that we could get through. I really appreciate it.
knew that he was on this, and I mean,
I'm gonna go.
It's around 8:15, I'm fine. I just wanted to make sure that.
Well, I really appreciate that. I'm gonna go grab one and we'll move on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We denied it.
Oh.
I can tell.
I told him we denied it. All right, so moving on, I think we're ready for our last item.
Okay, that would be F, is that correct? All right, item F, PZB project 23-1500007, request by Peter Edmond for consideration of a variance to allow a pool septic structure within the front yard of 212 16th Avenue North. The subject site is on single family residential and has a future land use as single family residential. So, is Mr. Heidemann here?
He is attending virtually on Zoom,
Okay.
and he'll be available.
So staff, could you let us know everything?
Definitely. Again, for the record, it's Abraham Fogel. And start off with the location map. This property is on the northeast corner of 16th Avenue North and North Ocean Breeze. Little bit of background, the original home is from the 1920s. As you can see, it's pushed all the way east. So this property, that's the alley you're seeing to the east. That's not additional yard they have. So this property doesn't really have a backyard. We started discussions with the property owner back in March about the variance, but it was only formally submitted in June. And then we processed that and we're bringing it before you. So our code does not allow accessory structures to be located in the front yard, essentially between the residence and the public street. In this property, that's the only possible location for you to put a pool, and that's why they're requesting a variance. Here we have a conceptual site plan of their proposed pool location. They will be respecting the setbacks, including the 20-foot front setback that you need from North Ocean Breeze. Here we have a property survey, again showing, I believe their rear setback is it's less than 3 feet, so the home is pushed all the way back. So in our staff report, we did conduct a preliminary review of our zoning regulations. They still have a lot of footprint on the lot. Of course, the pool doesn't count towards impermeable surface, but any, pavers that they might add surround that will count, but they still have a lot of allowance for that, and the pool will be meeting all the setbacks, which will be further reviewed at permitting. So very quickly, we do have our variance criteria that we need to go through. Number one pertains to special conditions that are particular to this lot. As I mentioned, there's no backyard, so really the area they have to use is the front yard. So that's peculiar. Most often, you have a front yard and a backyard for a property. Number two, whether strict interpretation of the LDRs would deprive the applicant of any reasonable use of the land. The property has accommodated a home for almost 100 years. However, we do find that it is a reasonable expectation of a single family home in South Florida to have a pool. Moving on to number three, whether this is the minimum necessary. It is, since they only have a front yard and they're asking to put it in the front yard between the residence and the street. And number four, whether granting this variance would be injurious to any neighbors. Although pools are typically not located in the front yard, does not appear that it would be detrimental to the public welfare, and we've also conditioned the variance accordingly to provide either fencing or hedging to screen the pool from view. Therefore, we find that the request is meeting all the variance criteria. We are recommending approval subject to the conditions, which I just mentioned, to have that landscape screen, and that the full zoning review will take place at permitting. That concludes my presentation, and the property owner is connected virtually. Let me just make sure.
I'm here.
Okay, good.
This is Peter.
Is Peter sworn in?
I think we need to swear you in, and we'll need you to turn on your camera for that.
Okay.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear and affirm the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
So any questions for staff or the applicant?
I have a question. I don't see the fence, like legally the pool has to have a fence around it, and I don't see the fence on the plan there. I'm just wondering, not sure what I'm sure somebody here knows the required height of the pool fence is 48 inches. I'm not sure. But the pool fence has to be a certain distance from the pool, so I just wanted to make sure that the fence would not create a non-conformity with the site plan.
We've brought a few of them forward. So the high limit of 4 feet in the front yard for the fence would meet that requirement for the pool as well.
So the
There's
fence
not,
could go as close, it could go up to the property line.
basically. and
The
not
fence
be-
can, but if you were worried about the height, the 4 feet is sufficient for the pool. We
Okay.
did have someone in the past who asked for more. They did not need it for safety or for the pool. They just happened to want it for privacy.
All right, but they would actually they would not be allowed to have, according to our code, they would not be allowed to have a fence that's higher than 4 feet.
Correct, but that would meet the requirements of securing the pool.
I see, okay, thank you.
We had a similar situation like this in another property that was in the College Park area. And I do agree that for a house that's not conforming to begin with, I mean, to be able to have a pool and things, that's obviously the right, especially if it fits on the property, but I think this is a case where that house is also in a very fine place, and I don't know if, I'd like to ask, Mr. Hagman, if he had considered a higher, if he wanted the privacy screen, or how he felt about that.
Well, we
I
don't,
like the idea of the of having vegetation on the 20 feet of the, the west side of the property. Honestly, we selected this property to buy because it has a nice big yard for a 50 by 100 lot. I grew up in an apple orchard, and having trees around me makes me happy. We love the mango tree there. So we like the idea of having the privacy, and the 20 feet on the west side is great, and we're inclined to put quite a bit more vegetation on the south side of the property as well. We envision putting more of a structural wall ultimately on the east side, well, the west side of the driveway,
Yeah.
to close in that yard.
The issue really is the heights, because on what is considered the front, you're putting a structural wall.
Mhm.
You'd have to come in for another variance if you wanted anything higher. than
hold on,
6
let
feet.
Abe.
Okay, so let's go to his site plan. So this would be the front area, the first 20 feet,
Mhm.
the front and the side property lines. That's the, let's just say the 4 foot high fence area. But starting back from 20 feet,
20 feet, you can do higher. of
you can
course.
do the 6 as long as you have the required 30-inch planting.
Right.
He could, if that was an issue as well, he could pull the pool even further in.
Oh.
So that it was completely enclosed with a higher fence, if you wanted that additional privacy. You can achieve that with plants, a combination of plants and fencing. So usually you can do that within the constraints.
And we don't recommend the 6 feet on the front property line. We would rather see a fence and landscaping, because that's more consistent with the
With the
neighborhood
plan. Yeah,
pattern.
understood. I wanted to know if he was very aware of that, because it wouldn't be the fence that was up to 6 feet in the front. It would be something of a buffer, like a landscape buffer, that would be the 6 feet. So that's what I wanted to get across. If not, you have to come back for a variance, which probably would be denied because it's not.
Well, the landscaping can be tall. It's
Well,
just-
landscaping,
Yeah, it's just the fence.
He's
Yeah, yeah.
talking about a solid fence, which would be more like a concrete fence, right? And would be, if it is consistent with that street and everything else, then it would be a 4 foot height. So,
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. We like the vegetation idea more than the fencing idea anyway.
okay, no problem. Okay, do you have a motion?
Do we have any public
Sure.
comment?
I'll do it.
No, we have no public comment.
No public comment, okay. That's good, already. Are we ready for a motion? Yeah.
I move to approve ZB project number 23-01500007 with staff recommended conditions for a variance to the accessory structure location to allow the installation of a pool between the principal structure and the public street for the property at 212 16th Avenue North. The application meets the variance criteria based on the data and analysis in the staff report.
Second,
Second.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, sir.
Thank- Thanks, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, any planning issues from our lovely planners?
I will just give you an update that tomorrow I am transmitting the property rights element to the Department of Economic Opportunity, the one that we had to adopt. You guys remember you saw that? Basically, the state said you have to adopt this or you don't get to amend your comprehensive plan anymore. So we were like, cool, we'll do that.
Thank you very much.
So we're gonna do that, and then the second round of the LDR amendments that I believe they're scheduled for August 15th. For second reading of the LDR, and you will be happy to note that the city commission, we presented your recommended alteration to the code, and they took your recommendation under advisement and included that change in the LDR ordinance. So I wanted to let you know that.
I think you should do more and clarify the sign thing. So we don't have.
Too late.
I know we made you work tonight, okay? You earned your money, all $0.
Yeah, right.
So great for the planning issues. Anybody from the public like to say anything? All right. By the way,
Fast, lovely.
Mr. Kevin is a Lake Worth resident. I know he is, and he's moving in about a month's time to Lantana of all places. So he's defecting.
I have to say Lantana has a place in my heart because that was my first planning job
There
out
you
of
go.
graduate
There
school.
you
I
go.
was the community planner for the town of Lantana.
There you go.
I love Lantana.
All right, great stuff. All right, any department reports? No, great. Board member comments, guys.
Dan's back.
Question,
Yes.
will you all be here in, the beginning of August?
August 2,
August
What's the meeting?
in 2 weeks.
the second.
Yeah, I won't be.
I'll be here.
So 1, 2, 3. Need one more form, thank you.
Maybe one more, and you can move forward. All right, guys, thank you. We are